All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Admin Essentials series. My name is Becky Willis, and I am a brand new program specialist at AUCD. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So this event is going to be a roundtable discussion on the topic of moving offices. So we hope that our content experts can help to inform this discussion and that collectively we can all solve some problems and challenges, share promising practices, and collect resources during the course of this discussion. And based on this roundtable, I'll create a tip sheet that will be created and disseminated to the network. So a few logistical items that I want to know. This roundtable is being recorded and will be available later on AUCD's website following the event. We ask people if they're able to turn on their cameras to encourage better discussion. Please mute yourself when you aren't talking to prevent any background noise. You can feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions and engage in the conversation, but you can also just jump in if you have something to add. And there will also be a short evaluation survey at the close of this event. So we invite you to provide any feedback you have on the roundtable and provide suggestions for future topics, potentially for our Admin Essentials series. So to get us started, we've invited Bruce Kiesling from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center and Amy Hewitt at the University of Minnesota to share their expertise and to support this conversation. So if you guys want to take a moment to introduce yourselves and give a little bit of background on your experience with moving offices, maybe when your move took place, what was the motivation for your move, and any kind of themes or takeaways that you have from your move. And then we can just move into our discussion. So Bruce, I guess first.
Sure. I think Amy and I have made this comment once before, but it bears repeating. We do not consider ourselves subject matter experts. I think we would say that our scars have healed. And so we're here to share a little bit about that process of moving across a university and a large bureaucracy for what it's worth. Our move occurred a little over a year ago, March 2021. We had occupied the same building for 51 years on the medical school's campus. We were one of the original 19 centers that had been built out by the Kennedy administration dollars. So we had folks living in a spot for a very, very long time. And so that's one context of the challenges that we sort of faced. The move was brought on by the university. Certainly the building was old and in need of repair, but as part of a campus master plan, the building was demolished to create housing for students, which was sorely needed, and created the opportunity for us to move closer in the central part of campus and be co-located with other similar programs. Some quick tips that I guess I would have that we can expound upon however folks would like to take the conversation today. For me, it was managing faculty and staff's anxiety. The process of moving occurred probably over 5 years, and only in the last 2 years did that involve actually doing things. Lots of talking, lots of variable timelines, variable sources of communication, and sort of a slow, fast, slow, 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 fast, slow timeline as competing interests and priorities would rise to the surface with regards to the university. Some of that was funding, and some of that was just sort of the jigsaw puzzle of where do people go when other people are displaced, that sort of thing. I would say you can't start too early in planning. Spending time inventorying who you have and what you have, and realizing if you've been in a building a long time like we have, you'll discover things you didn't know you had that have been sort of lurking about. No one ever threw anything away. They just pushed it into another room or another closet. So kind of following that line of kind of looking at what you've got and what your needs are going to be. There are some real hidden costs in moving that we didn't anticipate. Things like changing your address with state licensure, marketing, print materials, telephone and answering services. If you have a clinic, that you need to sort of take that into account and get the guarantees that you can on the front end with the university of covering some of those costs. And then finally, I had a list of sort of players that I was involved in over the last couple of years. The most important being what we call space utilization here. And whoever that person is on campus, if you're lucky to have more than one, we didn't. It's really important to develop a relationship with them where they understand who you are and what your mission is. They're really your advocate at the university level to get the best space possible that will meet your needs most efficiently. And if they don't understand you well, they're constantly just reacting to sort of the latest crisis and resource demands that are being placed upon them. For us, we also needed to have relationships with folks like Surplus. We got rid of over 1,000 items of furniture. Destruction or migration of records. We ended up destroying 35,000 medical records that went back to 1964. That was many memos and consultations with legal and the state, but we simply weren't going to be able to move that bulk of paper in our new location. IT, phones, website, marketing, and then two interesting ones that we ran across is your university probably has some kind of department that deals with archival information and historical artifacts. And we found quite a few in the process of sort of going through the building and deciding how those were going to be dispensed, whether they were going to be stored, they were going to be returned to a family of origin that had donated them at some point in time. And then also keeping in mind your donors, folks that have philanthropic efforts with your programs, keeping them advised as best possible of the process, but also finding a way to ensure that honoring their donations and their contributions to your program will still have sort of a visible outward face in the new space was something that we needed to work toward. And frankly, we're still doing that as we're waiting for a temporary clinic to become a permanent situation for us. So those were some of the key points that I sort of had as takeaways from our own experience.
Well, I had the luck of the draw that we moved after Bruce did. And so I could call him up and say, can you believe this? He was a support to me through the process. But I'm Amy Hewitt from the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration. And our story is very different from Bruce's. When I became the director of ICI about 3.5 years ago, it was a huge priority of mine for us to find better space for our staff. We were in what is now the second oldest building on campus that was built in 1889 and had been in that building for 36 years. We were one of the later USEDs to be funded. And we had outgrown that building about 20 years ago, literally. And so my strategy first was to make those relationships that Bruce was talking about, to find the people on campus who I felt strongly had a formula of how they use the built environment and allocated space per FTE. Somebody had to have that on our campus. And so I finally found my way to that person who came out and did a walkthrough with me. And the first thing we were able to do was to get the basement condemned. Our basement would flood water foot and a half, at least 2 or 3 times a year. There was black mold everywhere. 3/4 or more of our staff were on antihistamines routinely. Like, it was just clear it was a bad place. So she helped me do what needed to be done to get the basement condemned. We got it condemned, but that meant 1/3 of our staff had to move into a building that was already way too small for us. Simultaneous to that, programmatically, we'd been engaged in conversations about gearing towards applying for an IDDRC on our campus, because our USED is very community focused, always done our work in the community, had absolutely no formal connections to our med school or any of the clinics. And we saw some advantage to coming together around clinical research. So it just kind of all fell together. I mean, we moved in October of 2020, and it was a little over 2 years start to finish, from concept to the university purchasing the old Shriners Hospital, which is on this beautiful 13-acre plot of land on the river. They gutted it and completely redid it for our center to move in. We take up just about half of the space. And then all of the neurodevelopmental disability clinics, all the researchers that are in the neurodevelopmental disability arena came. And so we're all, some of our Institute on Child Development folks are there. We're all going to come together in this new building. And the university just very quickly raised the money. So there was good and bad in that. A good thing in that is that we had never been connected to our university foundation, never really had any focus on philanthropic dollars coming into our institute. So a positive outcome is those relationships have been built, and we've gotten some pretty sizable gifts, which was just luck of the draw. And then the downside really is all these new people in a building that we had to share, and we've never shared a building before. And not only the building and having to share the building, but extremely different organizational cultures on the medical side of our campus. We're in the College of Education and Human Development. And so one of our biggest things is literally the project was so fast tracked that these partners, I mean, I spent more time talking about building, furniture, just everything about where people were going to be sitting and how it was going to be constructed and colors, and that by the time we got in that building, we really hadn't thought about all the programmatic connections, and we're finally there now, but that was a big lesson learned for us. Like Bruce, I don't think anything from ICI ever in its 36-year history was ever thrown away. We had if you were lucky to have a closed door office, it was very big. And we just had a ton of storage in people's actual offices that we didn't plan for in this new, we planned for our storage closets, but not for everything that had been stored in people's individual offices. So that was another lesson learned, is how are we going to reduce the amount of storage, because we knew we needed to do that, but do that in a realistic way. That was another big piece. And then we built this great new building, but all the designs and everything were in place. The ship had sailed before COVID, and I'm pretty sure it might look a little different post-COVID, but the university was, I mean, it's just once the ship sails, you're on this path to getting it done. So we have just a really different building environment. It's designed to be shared collaborative space. There's new work kind of ethics and rules around how you respect people who, you know, many of our staff don't have permanent spaces anymore. They have drop-down spaces depending on when they come, how many days a week they're in the office, or if they're in the office just very periodically. People who have closed door spaces have very small offices with no windows. They're all the same size. The building's designed for us to be out and mingling amongst one another. That's taken a lot of time for people to get used to, and we didn't plan wisely enough. Well, even if you are a touchdown person, you kind of want to hook your laptop to a big monitor. So we had all these touchdown spaces and no capacity for people to have a screen in front of them, those kinds of things. So that whole building anew and really thinking about everything you have to plan for. For us on the cost side, I don't understand it, but it didn't cost me any money. It didn't cost me a penny for us to move. It became a university project. And when it's a university project, like, they pay for everything. So our move was paid for, all our new furnishings were paid for. We were not allowed to bring anything with us. So you could have just bought a brand new chair, but it could not enter into that new building. So those were, it was great. It didn't, I suspect that's not a typical thing. And then the only other cultural piece that I would say is, our program is very life course. And we were moving in with people who only study kids and or only clinically treat kids. And so it just feels like we're on this constant messaging around this isn't just a building on campus that meets the needs of kids. We're life course. I'll stop there because I know we're interested in hearing your questions and helping you think through what you're hoping for.
Hi, this is Nicole from Virginia. This is super interesting because we are in this process right now. We're in a little bit of a different situation because we're not on campus right now. We do not reside on Virginia Commonwealth University's campus, so we're moving to another building. We're in a city building right now. But what I was going to ask, and I know you, Amy, you just said this, that it didn't cost you anything to move, which is amazing. But because we're not there, I was curious to see if anyone out there could share costs of moving. And I know it's going to vary from state to state and size and things. I just would like to get an idea. We're getting quotes right now, but it's going to take a little while to get those.
We were similar to Amy. We're having to pay for some sort of unintended back costs in terms of just setting up some technology and that sort of thing. But the front end was all done by the university as well. And we were fortunate enough, we now occupy what was once the College of Nursing space. They themselves got a brand new building and marching orders to not move furniture, which was a serious upgrade to our furniture, which we then left behind. So we kind of pillaged several floors over a course of several weeks, and thankfully got the better hand-me-downs as far as that went. But can't help you with the moving costs there.
And Nicole, I should clarify, over that 36 years, we certainly paid for our move in our indirect costs.
Oh, I do not doubt that at all. I do not doubt that at all. Okay, I think we're just in a little bit of a different situation because we're not on campus and we're not moving to campus because of indirect costs. So I was just curious about that, but we here have already started cleaning stuff out and purging things. And we've done one move from, we were on the 11th and 10th floors. Now we're on the first floor because someone bought our building and they made all the above floors apartments. So we've already been through one move about 10 years ago. And even with that, we still brought stuff from the 90s over with us. So we're not going to do that again.
Nicole, I would reach out to the director of the Arkansas you said. They moved, it's been a couple of years, but more recently than that, from a downtown spot by the Mississippi River to more of West Little Rock. And I think that was a big cost savings on their part, but they've had to operate sort of several hours away from the main campus of which they're now housed.
Okay. And we're moving from downtown, which is very costly because downtown Richmond, the real estate is very expensive, and, parking is a hassle, everything about moving west, not as far as what they did 2 hours, but just west of campus. And we have kind of a area that we need to stay within. So it is interesting. So that's a great, that is a good idea for you, because I know that it is different with not being on campus. So thank you for that idea to reach out to them.
One thing that, Bruce and I sort of laughingly talked about all the stuff that had to be purged, but thank goodness that we were under COVID restrictions, because if we hadn't been under COVID restrictions, I'm not sure we planned far enough in advance for that purging. I don't think you can plan too far in advance. In fact, if moving isn't even on your radar, I'd start purging now and just have a couple of purge days to just start clearing stuff out. We I can't tell you how hard that was. And then the pickup, it's not like we had so much to purge that we were overextending like how much the pickup people could take. So it really extended the length of time because we didn't really realize that there were restrictions on how much the university could pick up at any given time.
Yeah,
And the other thing is we tried to give as much of it away to anybody we thought might want it. But it was hard, and it takes a lot of time, and I would build some incentives into your staff and some funny games, and we did what we would sort of who found the oldest thing or who found the weirdest thing, that kind of stuff that kept people going.
it was definitely a family affair. Lots of weekends. I think at one point we were rocking 31 shred-it bins at a time. I mean, it was just a massive amount of stuff. And of course, you have to have accounts set up through the university for that. And some of it is just getting the process to continually sort of reload so that you can keep things going and moving forward. One thing we didn't do that I thought about after the fact would be if you think that you've got just a lot of that sort of stuff to go through, or you've also got interesting archival information. I thought about bringing together a group of retirees or alumni from the center to sort of help manage some of that. Lots of them have a stake in the center, and a lot of them have a love for the center. And so thinking about a way that a small group of them might help volunteer to be sort of ambassadors to the university and help you sort of navigate some of the going through of things and sorting those things out. But yeah, we were amazed at what people would leave behind decades later: personal items, family Bibles. We'd have to get online and we'd find obituaries to see if people had passed or if they were still in the area. So it's a function of size, I guess, and how many moves that you've had. But maybe to think about whether retirees might play some significant role in helping out, and maybe even having some institutional memory to connect some dots and relationships for you all.
We did do some of that, Bruce. All the past directors, we like saved some piles for, although I inherited an awful lot of stuff from them that they'd gone through. But another thing about that purging is if you could come up with parameters or rules that everybody followed up front. So I'll give you some examples. Two things for us were, if it's a book and you can get it in the library and you haven't used it in the last 2 years, you don't need to keep it. It can be donated somewhere. If it was an article and it's online, readily accessible to you, we paid people to sort of go through and just see if they could find stuff online and in libraries. And then, all that was really at the discretion of the employee, but we did give them parameters, and that pushed some. There's one person that is surrounded by her boxes, floor to ceiling, in our new space, but she didn't get any more space. And then there's me, where I probably over purged because I'm a purger. And so something in the middle, but that's reasonable. And there are some parameters to it. The day I had to get rid of all my journals was really hard for me. But I did it. I persevered. So that would just be a word of advice, to agree, at least have your leadership staff agree on some parameters.
And for us, it was more cost effective oftentimes to shred and destroy things, but we did have a very nice sort of genetic repository of paper charts that division negotiated with the university, digitizing everything and or getting it to sort of a secured off-campus location, but that was a considerable expense. And so some of it is thinking about what's the research value of some of the data and some of the materials that you have, and trying to convince folks within the university system of the kind of the cost benefit analysis of keeping, retaining, or transforming some of that data into something that can be kept. The other thing is, if you're fortunate enough to be on this call in like 10, 15 years out, I wish we would have worked more philanthropically to create an opportunity to sort of have a cash flow that we could have bankrolled this more ourselves. I think we would have had more control over where we ended up, what it looked like, a building fund, something that you kind of have in terms of endowments that you can build upon. We were more at the mercy of available space and different configurations. So that takes a long runway though, oftentimes. So we weren't really going to be able to avail ourselves to that. We might in the next iteration that'll outlive all of our work lives, where the College of Medicine will have a build of a series of buildings. But to be at the table as soon as you can with that. Lori, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm following Brent Askevig as a director, and he is not a saver. So we're in pretty good shape, even though we haven't moved. And I guess just a suggestion: we play office roulette a lot. I've been here 25 years. I've had 10 different offices, and actually I've moved fewer times than many other folks have. When they have to move from this office to that office, they purge on their own a lot of times. So I think that's a good one. And then somebody put in the chat about hiring students to scan documents. And we have done that. We used to have every grant that was ever written for the entire history of our center in binders along a shelf, and we hired student workers or other folks that could do the scanning, and so we've moved to a lot of electronic kinds of things. Our problem, and maybe one of the reasons that we are purging, is because we are cramped into the tiniest space that we can possibly be in. We've actually started offering people the opportunity to work from home simply because we don't have enough office space. And our university, probably like every other university, has little spaces squirreled away here and there, and nobody wants to give up their space. And nobody in the administration will tell anybody they have to give up their space. And so we're right at the very beginning, I think, Amy, of the process that you talked about, where we're not going to condemn anything, but we're definitely going to be fostering some of those relationships. How do you suggest we plead our case and talk about being important and all of those kinds of things to?
Yeah. So to me, what we did, one, I identified the total indirect that we'd provided to the university. That number's pretty powerful. There is a formula somewhere there where you can say, okay, we have X number of FTE, and this is how much square footage we have. And you're not following your own policy by not providing us with the same amount of square footage. I mean, when you're in a building that was built in the late 1800s, no matter how hard you've tried, it's not accessible. And so I really used that because we had a number of people who use power chairs that work for us. And one, it was destroying the beautiful woodwork in the building. And two, it just couldn't be made accessible. So I used that argument quite a lot. And I can't think of any other tricks other than the whole community service component. Universities sometimes struggle to meet the community service and outreach aspects of their missions, and UCEDs are a place where that just happens. That's all we do, really. And so I use that and the research as two of the arguments around university mission. That was helpful.
About the same here. We kind of reviewed the strategic plan of the university and the college and tried to demonstrate our alignment and how we sort of solved some of their needs in that regard. I will tell you, after being in the same place for 51 years and kind of creep of people and kind of the organicity of people just kind of squatting and living their lives, it's a little bit of a cold shock to the system to meet space utilization and the actuarials that they'll put on people in terms of how much square footage you have, what do you do, how often are you here, those sorts of things. And so learning a little bit more about that and helping prepare your staff for that, I think, is key. We are, we're in sort of a conventional office space now that looks like a ice cube tray full of offices and a lot of white noisemakers outside of them. And so the old culture was, if you didn't like your neighbor, go find another hallway to live in. We have 85,000 square feet in this monstrously big building, and that's all gone. So realizing and learning a little bit about how the university sort of does the math, as Amy said, does the formula. I think you can kind of, better for you to work to solve your own problems than for them to sort of come in and do that for you as much as possible.
No, I really didn't think, I wasn't very good at thinking about the emotional side of the move for our staff. I've worked at ICI for 33 years and I couldn't wait to get out of there, and I haven't missed that building for 30 seconds. And yet a lot of people feel very differently than me. And I could have done a better job at gauging like the range of those emotions and planning for the range of those emotions. It's not that I wasn't kind and empathetic and all of that, but it did come down to, we are moving, so you kind of gotta get on board with this. I thought in my head we might lose 5 employees over the move because there were so many people who really did not want to move. We haven't lost anybody, even though they were very adamant about, because we moved slightly off of campus, and we were in the heart of the campus, and you could walk to 20 different places for lunch, and you had to park a half a mile away and walk in, but you could go grab lunch lots of places. When things weren't happening on campus, you saw it happening, and we're maybe about a half a mile from where we were, but we're off camp. We're technically considered on campus, but we're off campus in the eyes of our staff. Now, that said, I park in a garage and I walk right into the building, and in the middle of the winter I can wear Birkenstocks, because there's so many perks to the building. And then we're right on the river, so people can exercise, and there's a little canteen, so if you forget to bring lunch, you can buy a salad or whatever. It all worked out, but the buildup was just filled with intense anxiety and emotion.
Same for us. And I'd say we've lost some folks, and that probably wasn't the only reason, but it certainly was a contributing factor to go from the edge of campus, off by ourselves, our own parking lot that was free and a big space, to now we pay for parking. We're in a large tower, but we're central to campus. As a administrator, frankly, I'm really happy with the move. We're closer together, and to me that means greater accountability and visibility as well. And so I've appreciated that. I've learned more about what my staff need and what their strengths are and kind of who's doing what and when. But I agree, the anxiety around the move and the implications for it were huge. Unlike Brent's shop with you, where you guys move regularly, I've met other units here that have moved within this building complex 5 or 6 times in the last 10 years. And our folks were just not used to that. Felt like I wanted to hand out the little children's book, Country Mouse, City Mouse, where we were Country Mouse and now we're in the city, and we've had to sort of adjust indoor voice. And yes, the chancellor could be walking through at any minute, and oh, look, there's the vice chancellor and the chief of staff downstairs at Starbucks. And so it's sort of a different percept for folks, and some have thrived and some are still adjusting, I'd say.
Another thing that I hadn't really totally anticipated with our staff was the amenities that, like, we have a lot of amenities. We used to not have any amenities. But they have to share those amenities with other people now. And so the ways in which we used to address the person who's not cleaning the sink or their dishes out of the sink, like we knew who they were, but we don't necessarily know who they are now. So those sort of strategies we're trying to figure out with our new building mates. Another thing is how space was assigned. I don't know about where you work, but in all those years at Patty Hall, like the last thing you wanted to be on was a space committee. Nobody ever wanted to talk about space because it was just a hot topic. And the way space was allocated was by program area. And so then people became very territorial, like these offices are education policy and services, and you can't touch them. And yet they might have fewer staff than community living and employment, but there was just this turf around who owned the space. So I was very clear when we moved that we were not allocating space based on projects, based on program area. We were allocating space based on the person and the need. And that's been a whole shift. But it does sort of bust up some of that turfy silo stuff I'm trying to still bust it up. And space is a good way to do that. So we just kind of have new rules of space allocation, and there's a pool and here's the pool, and whoever's got the need at the time gets the slot.
So Amy, this is Nicole from Virginia again. And sorry guys, but we are like knee deep in this process. And my office mate, we are both heading up the space committee. So you can imagine we probably could talk to you until 8 o'clock tonight. What we both want to know is, in having said and what you just said, like how the space was allocated and you're now doing it rather than program area, but doing it like whatever the person needs, how has that really gone? We are looking at each other like, oh my gosh, did that work?
It's worked so far. I mean, there's one crabby person who's going to be no matter what, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a few.
And it's just worked because you can just say, this is the rule. There's no, and you know, in our programs, like you lose a big center. Well, we're not going to hold that space for all the staff that left because that center's gone, or it just has to be based on where the need is.
So was it you or Bruce who said that everybody who had a closed door office, you said the build out was they're the same size, no windows? That was in your center? Okay.
That's ours, no window. Then, you know, all the natural light and amenities are out in these more open, shared, collaborative spaces.
And for us, it's a mix. The exteriors all have windows. We have a lot of closed office space. The interiors don't. The medical division director and I basically assigned everybody, and we took our lumps, but we tried to do that in a way that, you know, there were pros and cons. Do you want a little office with a view of the Mississippi River, or do you want a big office that doesn't have any windows? And so what were your needs? What are you bringing with you? For us in the age of COVID too, the bigger spaces, could you meet with students and staff? And it's still an evolving process. We lost all of our one-way observation mirrors with our clinics. And so some of that is seeing how we settle out, and then it's going to be me paying to punch holes in walls and make some observation space, which then we lose office space as a result. But it's important for us to have that clinical piece for supervision. And this space that we're in now wasn't actually the original proposed space that we would move into. It's 2 down the road. So it just kind of keeps showing you about the evolving nature of it all that creates anxiety for folks. I'm much more pleased in this space than where they originally were going to put us. But when you can't afford to pay for it outright, you sort of have to go with the chief of staff and kind of the prevailing winds and just try to develop those relationships, keep reiterating the mission, and talking about what the needs are.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I know on our end, it was kind of opposite, you know, as I said, of Bruce's situation where we got to design this building. I mean, we truly did. I'm not sure I'd ever want to do that again. It was not fun for me, it was not fun to talk about all those details about everything, but I survived it. I will say that collaborative process, we ended up with some really, I mean, we have these beautiful tele-outreach labs now in our USED center. We have a beautiful video green room studio thing. The clinics have, I mean, the design is just really cool. Every clinic has those two-way observational windows. So our LEND fellows now have so many more clinical opportunities than they used to right there. And then the research part of our building, the clinical research part of our building is, I don't even understand it all. It's got MRI machines and all kinds of clinical research gadgetry, I guess I would say. So if anybody ever is interested in even a video tour of it, I'm sure we could share components of it somehow, get it to you somehow. Because there's some really interesting, when you get to design it and work with the designers, you end up with something different than if you're given, here's a building, but you can't tear down the walls and you can't do anything with it.
You know, sort of related to that, we used it as an opportunity as well to sort of redouble our efforts with our children's hospital. And since our clinic is in a sort of a temporary state of affairs, what can we do to work together to create some additional opportunities for clinical experiences at the children's hospital and at the surrounding outpatient clinics? And I think even when our clinic gets finalized, we're not going to give those up. So we sort of use that as an opportunity to broker with the department and sort of the larger piece of us from which we spring to see what else can we do in this interim. And oh, look, it's really been productive and it's a mutual win-win. Let's keep this going. Richard, I thought I saw a hand or a mic a little while
I
ago.
did. I was going to comment on space and allocating space. And I've recently become the beneficiary of the title, you know, the Space King. Not something that I wanted. What we have done, we're rewriting our whole space allocation, our space policy. And rather than have it just everything on my shoulders, you know, I've got representatives from our different groups, from the research group, from the services group, from the TA group, and other key players. So, you know, they're all welcome to come and participate as we formulated our policy to give their input. So then when it comes time to making a decision, you know, the actual people who allocate that space, you know, they'll go down through the checklist and see what the needs are, see what is available, and make a decision. And hopefully, because we had some buy-in up front with that policy, hopefully it'll be a little less painful. That's the plan.
So this is David.
Hi.
I just have a question for you. We don't know if we're moving yet, but it's likely that there will be a new medical campus built, may break ground in late 2024, and we may very well get space in there. So there's a whole lot of unknowns at this point. But and so the information, what you guys have been talking about has been really helpful. Should it be that we move? Okay, because we would be moving from an off-campus location to what would be a new campus downtown. What I'm wondering specifically is, did either of you experience a change in your indirect cost rate as a result of the move?
Which I feel really lucky there too, David, because the way everything on the medical, it's almost like they're two different universities, the medical health side of the world and CEHD. But I don't remember the word for it. And then the other piece of this is you've got the clinical, how on campuses, the medical school partners with a healthcare entity, and ours is now called M Health. It's a merger between the University of Minnesota Health and Fairview. Now they call themselves M Health, but that's clinicals, like true clinics that are not teaching. They're not about teaching clinics necessarily. So there's really three entities: the College of Education, Human Development, the med school, and then M Health. And they all have different rules, different rates, all that stuff. But there's a group, it's called AWACA. I don't know what that stands for, that works out all that financial stuff. So we're not paying any more to anybody. All the indirect stays in our college. Everything runs like through our college, and the rent, if you will, was all agreed upon pre-move. So none of that changed for us because we were on campus and staying on campus in a new building.
Thanks, that's helpful. Oh,
Same,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Same for us as well. There was no change in indirect. I just realized we housed two different not-for-profits in our building, though, and both of those have since relocated to the larger Memphis area. One of them, I think, kind of went in with overinflated sense of entitlement with the university about, we've been in this building almost as long as the center has, and we're sort of due via a gentleman's agreement that you will continue to house us at no expense. And they were met with some fierce resistance there and moved on. So if you do have partnerships, though, where people sublease your space or that you work with, you'll want to sort of invite them into the process as much as it makes sense, but realize it's a new negotiation when a move like that happens with regards to space.
Makes good sense. The one other question I had was, since it's for many folks typical that you end up with, especially if you're moving from a big old space, that you have less space in the new area, how do you address planning for growth?
So David, we actually have way more space than we did, because when you apply the university's formula, we ended up with way more square footage. So that was good. It's just the actual allocated space is less square footage per person. So like my office is probably half what it was in Patty Hall, but it's all I need. It's very efficient. There's not all this inefficient space. Every nook and cranny is very efficient. So it's not like we lost space. We just moved into space that's configured differently. And then we planned for, the university had a formula for this too, like depending on how many people you have, your growth in the last 5 years, then they reasonably from that predict how much growth space you have. And that gets allocated to you. So they couldn't move anybody else in when we got to a certain point because we'd reached our threshold, which included a bit of growth space. I will tell you though, in the midst of all of this, the university implemented their flex work program. And so that has opened up a ton of space, because I told people early on, if you're not here 75% time in your office, you're not getting a closed door office. And very few people were getting those anyway, but even the managers and the leadership staff, if you're not here 75% time, you're not getting a closed door office. And now with the nicer like cubicles, and we have the nicest offices we have actually are these shared offices that used to be hotel rooms for this hospital. But even those now, we just have kind of rules. You know, you can still have your assigned a space, but if we grow and you're choosing to work mostly from home, your space is up for grabs. And I've told people that everybody had to sign these agreements about their work from home stuff. And in that whole process, that is what we shared with people. Like, you can choose to work from home, but once you agree to that, if we hire somebody who wants to work in the office, your space will be given to them.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And we've definitely gone down to a much smaller space. We do use kind of hotel offices for part-time folks. And I've had some discussion with retirees who still work with us, but still have a full-time office, and we'll be transitioning those to hotel spaces as well. I think for any substantial growth or new grants or projects, I just head back to space utilization, and it's another conversation of being able to demonstrate my need. The trick would be, where would it be and how close would it be to us? So most of us are all here on the same floor together, but we have a large relative caregiver program that's actually on another location on campus as well. The feasibility of putting everybody right next to each other just wasn't possible. So we'd have to go back and just ask for more space, but it's about building that relationship and having them sort of see that need. But you're right, with a new build, the politics will be probably pretty heavy.
It's going to be interesting. It helps that we moved out of a department and are a center within the School of Medicine now. So our reporting is higher up, and that's helpful. We'll see how it works. We'll let you know in the next few years.
You know, I'd say 99% of our support for this move and the cost was borne by the chief of staff and a vice chancellor, and not my department of pediatrics, not my college of medicine. And so it is finding the people that sort of hold the purse strings and are the decision makers, which oftentimes aren't the people kind of in our immediate administrative or faculty spheres.
Our main support, and the person who I'm in regular contact with, is the assistant dean for finance, that chief financial guy for the School of Med. So he knows these little pockets that I never would have thought of.
David, I do want to say, here in Virginia, one of the reasons why we are not on campus is because of the indirect costs. And that is the reason why we are not moving on to campus, because the indirect cost goes way through the roof. And we have never been on campus here at VCU. So it's something that we can't do. And the university has agreed that they would like for us to move in with other centers, but they don't have space for us. And it didn't work out. We kind of looked at some places. So we're staying off of campus for that specific reason. So I did think it was interesting that you asked that question. It's so interesting to me to hear from these USEDs that are on campus. I'm sure your indirect cost is probably way more than ours here. But it does complicate things quite a bit. We're negotiating with real estate agents and landlords, stuff like that. So we do not have the benefit of our university providing space and kind of behind us on that. We have VCU real estate brokers who we're dealing with, who are very nice and wonderful to deal with, but it's a lot of negotiating. So it's very interesting. And I'm with you. We'll let you know how it goes in a few years.
You know, Nicole, we started out that way. We started out looking at a number of rental properties, but we have 140 employees. Mm-hmm. So the amount of square footage we had to rent was huge. Mm-hmm. And it didn't take the college that long to figure out how much it would cost for it, because we've never paid our own rent. That all.
Oh, yeah, we
comes
pay
out
it
of-
all. We pay it all out of our
comes out
grants.
of Our indirect. So they, wherever we were gonna be, they were gonna pay it.
Gotcha.
But the rent was gonna be so expensive that
Mhm.
us being off campus wasn't gonna be an option for them.
Thank you. It's really interesting to see how it's done in different states.
Jen, did I see you unmute earlier? Did you have a question? Or am I making that up?
No, I had just, my name's Jen Daniels. I'm from the University of New Hampshire at the Institute on Disability. And I'm listening to you guys and we're in kind of a unique situation. We have the Institute on Disability that is on campus in our Durham, New Hampshire location. And I work at a satellite office an hour away in the city of Concord. And we kind of have to pay our own rent over there, but half of our office is still on campus and we're looking at having to move. Pretty good possibility in about a year and a half when our lease is up where we're at. We just moved in 2019, but COVID kind of knocked us all for a loop. A lot of people didn't come back. We have 10,000 square feet with like 6 people in it. Nobody wants to come back to the office and work. So now we're just kind of sitting, staring at this space and we're, I think the thought of subletting some of that space came up. The main reason for the space is so that we have large areas for meetings because we meet often with state partners and stuff. So now we're just kind of sitting, thinking, and I'm listening to y'all now and I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to be fun. So that was it. I'm just kind of contrasting what you all were saying there. It's going to be great.
Once you're through it though, it feels good. It took me months literally, because I have to kind of walk by one of our, we went from a space where we had 1 refrigerator and 2 microwaves and no place to sit and eat anywhere, to this building where, these are huge kitchens. There's 2 kitchens. There's 4 refrigerators, 4 microwaves, an oven, and like room for 50 people to sit in each one of them. And beautifully decorated, my favorite colors. And I would just laugh every day when I came into the office because it just was funny to me that we had such nice space. So anyway, it was worth the pain.
I think that one of the things that's going to happen, the space that we're in is we have a place next door to us that manufactures engines for race trucks and they test occasionally. We do a lot of webinars and, a lot of trainings and things like that. The office space isn't really the greatest. So I really have a feeling we're going to wind up having to move. And I've kind of taken it, well, with my director's permission, taken it upon myself and started really purging stuff out and like Facebook yard saling stuff, wherever I can get rid of all of the extra stuff. Because there is 30 years of stuff that's been moved probably 3 times now. So we've definitely started trying to kind of condense and get rid of stuff and turn a lot of things into electronic copies, because the home base kind of office really has all the paper copy stuff and we really don't need it necessarily. So that's been super helpful. And this move, I think, will be easier than the last one.
I think I'm one and done. I won't have to do it again.
Good way to think about it. I feel the same way.
Well, I think this has been a really great discussion, super interesting. If anyone has any parting thoughts just before we head to our 5 o'clock time, we'd love to hear them.
I was looking for a photograph. I'm not going to find it in time, but we used to have this gigantic medical records with these 2 winding staircases. And as we were leaving the building, we spray painted on the floor, "Elvis has left the building." And we did, and it is now gone. It took one little backhoe 3 months to take down that gigantic building. But change is inevitable. It provokes anxiety, but a lot can come of it that's good. we've really enjoyed being co-located with OT, PT, and the Office of Medical Education, just a floor or two away. Have a new relationship with the Office of Equity and Diversity. They now participate in our LIN training with content. Just the proximity has really created these neat opportunities that didn't exist when we were off by ourselves at the end of campus. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. I went ahead and put the final survey in the chat box. So if you want to take a moment to fill that out, that would be great. This was recorded, and so we'll put that on the website and send it out in an archived email. Anything I'm missing, Jamie?
No, it's great. And thank you again to Bruce and Amy for talking about their experiences. It was, I think, as we're seeing in the chat, really helpful, really informative and interesting. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to people about your experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure, all the best for grad school.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.